Coming over, I've got some comparatives that I want to show. We talked about the budget last time and it really got down into the weeds of it and the cuts that we were facing and how we were going to meet those revenue shortfalls. And since that time, the council has voted to keep the ad valorem property tax rate at the same level. So you can see we're still going to be at the 10.03 on our millage rate here, and this is just to give you an idea of where we're at in comparison to other counties and other cities within counties, and that's their combined city and county rates. For example, here's Orlando at 10.46, Fort Lauderdale at 12.23. So that just kind of gives you an idea. Now, as a result of the 10.03, what we're looking at this year, we're spending $396 per capita on police in Jacksonville. And here, St. Pete, we're looking at $590, Tampa $714, and again, this is in this year's budget. Now, with the 358, if we go to the 364, the $364 million budget that we thought we had going in, we're looking at even less than 421. If we get all 368 million that I'm asking for through Bill 450, we will actually be at this number would actually then go to 421. We're at 396 now. If I get the 10.5 million, then the budget goes to 368 million, and we're looking at about $421 per capita. But you can see, even with this huge pension cost in my budget, we're still spending less per capita, a lot less per capita, than any other major city in the state. And
Sheriff, can you say that in a way that the general public would I understand what you mean by that, but how do you tell the general public that?
Yeah, we spend $396 for each person in the city of Jacksonville on police services. Right now, St. Petersburg is spending $590 per person for police services in St. Pete. And here you can see Tampa's $714, and it goes all the way up to $899 for Fort Lauderdale. Now, I want to show you real quick. Over here, last time we spoke, I showed you this. This is my budget this year, and these are the different buckets that my budget, these are big buckets that my budget sits in. And you can see $287 million is in personnel expenses, which is salary and benefits, okay? Then this red box down here, this is internal services. Those are those areas where I have to do business with the city, like fleet, purchasing gas, workers' comp, all those things where I have to do business with the city. I can't touch that. They get to bill me and charge me whatever they want. Then over here, this last little box, you see at 3.69 million, that's insurance. Can't touch that. That leaves these two blocks in the middle, which are other services and charges and supplies and capital. Now what comes out of that is things like inmate food. I have to pay about $5.6 million just for inmate food every year. That comes out of that. This is uniforms, clothing, ammunition. That's all the operating stuff. So you can see I've got $26 million out of a $346 million budget to do all this with. So what that means is when you come back over here, now what I'd like to do is take this big blue bar for you, because this is personnel and expenses, and break it down for you between police, corrections, and civilian. Because see, here's one of the things I keep hearing out there. Well, the sheriff doesn't have to cut police. He can cut, he's got a lot of back office people he can cut. Well, let me show you the facts. The facts are, if you look at this, my I have 219 million in police. I have 55 million in corrections and 34 million in civilian personnel. That's this big blue bar broken down into these three categories: police, corrections, and then civilians. And let me explain this. Everybody that's not a police officer or a corrections officer is a civilian. That's everybody else, including CSOs, by the way. This is civilian staff per 100 positions within the agency. And this is comparing us with other law enforcement agencies. And here's Jacksonville. We have 22 civilian staff per 100 positions. Here's Las Vegas. We like to compare with Las Vegas because they're about the same size and they're a consolidated government. And they're at 31. Orange County, just south of here, Florida, Orange County, that's 31. Palm Beach County has 44. They have twice as many civilians as we do. So you can see, folks, we don't have a lot of civilians. When you look at the number of positions in most agencies, we don't have a lot of civilian positions to cut from to begin with. There's a reason for that. The reason for that is this isn't the first year we have cut. We've been cutting for multiple years now, and where do you think I cut first? I cut the civilians. So that's why we already come in with fewer civilians than most other agencies. Now what I want to show you here is there's been a lot of talk out there, and this is where you guys in the media can really help us out. You know, the problem gets exacerbated when you have people throwing out numbers and they don't know what those numbers mean, where they come from, and sometimes it's just downright false numbers. For example, it's been reported that in budget and management, right here, it's been reported that the city has 9 people in budget and management, and the sheriff's office has 15. Well, fact of the matter is, I have 15 in budget and management, but the city has 119. If you look at what they have in their budget office, they may have 9 people in their budget office, but it's not just the budget people, it's all the accounting people as well. That's budget and management. That's what we have on our roll call, is budget and management. That's every account clerk, every requisitioning person. All of that is in this 15 for us. The city has 119 in that same process. Then also I can tell you it was reported that we had 30 people in our HR department. And if we're consolidated, why does the sheriff's office have 30 people in HR and the city's got 55 people in HR? Why do you need so many people in HR? Well, I don't have 30 people in HR, I've got 13. And here's what the individual that looked at that didn't know. This 55, this 13 is what we actually have. But if you go into our roll calls and you look at our roll calls and you add up the number of names that you see on the HR roll call, you'll get to 30. But they're not working HR. That's where I take officers who, let's say I have a detective, for example, who gets transferred to Afghanistan. He's in the military. He's on military leave status. I'm not paying him, so I want to move him out of his detective roll call onto the city HR, or onto our HR roll call, so I know where all of those special status people are at, and I ensure that we're not paying a guy double when we shouldn't be. That's what those other positions are in HR. So I don't have 30 people in HR, I've got 13. Now let me show you this. Let's go back to budget management. The city has 119, I have 15. The total is, I have 11% of the total number of people in this city working in budget and management. Yet we have, you know, depending on the number, half of the general fund budget. Half of the people working in the city, almost. Yet we only have 11% of HR. That's because we are consolidated. And we're not duplicating anything that the city does in HR. We do time and attendance. That's mainly what these folks are doing. And we have some confidential personnel files and that sort of thing that they manage, obviously. Now, I'm sorry, that's in human resources. We have a large percentage of the budget, yet we only have 11% of the people working in budget management. Then if you look at information systems technology, you know, the city has 143. We have 40. Now look, again, we don't duplicate anything in our IT that the city does in their IT. So, and I'll give you this as an example. City IT creates GIS maps, the Geographic Information System maps. It's the street guides and those sorts of things. What we do is take those maps and we populate them with crime data, because we're an intelligence-led policing department. In fact, two of our members, our director in patrol, and Jamie Rouse, who now heads up our crime analysis unit, they just got inducted into the Evidence-Based Policing Hall of Fame at George Mason University. I mean, so we're very much into intelligence-led policing in this organization, and we're recognized across the country for that ability and capability. And so we're very proud of that. Yet we only have 22% of the total personnel that are involved in IT work. But again, we don't duplicate anything that they do. Those GIS maps that they make, we take and populate. We don't make maps ourselves. And everywhere that we can find economy of scale with them, we partner with them. I mean, it only makes sense. Look, we're trying to save money too. So we don't duplicate anything that they're doing. In fact of the matter is, I have Homeland Security systems that I run, obviously, being in law enforcement. Our Fusion Center, the Joint Terrorism Task Force Fusion Center, those things are confidential. We can't have anybody with access to that outside of JSO. In addition to that, in those systems that are confidential, we are constantly reviewing IP addresses that our people are sending information out to. That's how we caught the clerk down in Records and ID, remember, sending information about dope dealers out to her boyfriend. So those kind of things, that work, if we consolidated my IT over with the city, first of all, you're not going to save a dime, because my people are working their panties off over here. If you transfer them over there, they're still going to have to do the same amount of work. So you're not going to save a dime. But in those areas where we can consolidate, like going out and buying laptops as a group, or buying air cards as a group, those kind of things, no problem. But my IT is the lifeblood of this organization. It's how we function. That's why we got this evidence-based acknowledgement from George Mason University. The fella Jerry Ratcliffe from Temple University, who wrote the book on intelligence-led policing, came here to look at our system because he heard about it through the Police Executive Research Forum, came and looked at it and said, John, you guys got the second best intelligence-led policing initiative I've ever seen. And I'm like, really? Well, who's number one? He said the Northern Irish Republic. Now, so we ain't chasing those guys. But I make that point to say this. One reason we're able to get by with so few officers, we're at 1.95 officers per 1,000 population. Most everybody else is 2+. The reason we're able to do that is because we have a very robust crime analysis unit that is supported by our IT. I can't give our IT up. Now, to show also specifically IT. Our IT, we have one supporting 76 officers. One for every 76. Again, Las Vegas, comparing them, they have 1 to 93. So they're actually doing a little better than us. They're supporting a few more. But Orange County, we're doing a lot better than them. And Palm Beach is at 182, so we're about the same. So I give you this to show that we're not heavy in IT. We're right where we should be. And in fact, the Matrix Consulting Group, who came in here from California, looked at us. They were hired by the mayor's office, the city council, and myself. They came in, did an operational study of JSO. And they said, you guys are efficient, you're effective, but you are woefully understaffed. And that was in the Matrix Consultant report. Now, one of the things that they focused on was IT. And they said an agency our size, actually an agency of any size, should have 1 to 3% of their personnel assigned to IT support function. 1 to 3%. They said, however, did I mess that up?
It's 2 to 3.
I'm sorry, he's right, 2 to 3. 2 to 3% in their IT. They said, however, Jacksonville, because we are consolidated, and for example, again, you know, city IT is making those maps for us, so I don't need those support personnel for that. So our target is between 1 and 1.5% support for IT. We're currently at 1.3, so we're right where we should be, having taken consolidation into account. So my point is, this idea that we have all this backroom numbers of people and that we're wasting staff because we've got an IT and the city's got IT. We've got an HR and the city's got HR. You know, we've got budget management and the city's got budget management. We don't duplicate what they do. So it's not a duplication of effort, and you can see from these numbers we're right where we should be. And I'll show you on this board right behind you, because I don't have that board, but on this scale here, this is every civilian position in the sheriff's office. I'm sorry, guys. But this is every civilian position in the sheriff's office. These are the 154 civilians that we're going to cut this year. Okay? Now these that are up in green up here, these are critical support functions. This right here, the 158 that we're going to wind up with, these are dispatchers. These are dispatchers and call center people. When you call the sheriff's office, you talk to a civilian, you don't talk to a policeman. The policemen are out on the street. We heard the public years ago and said, get those officers out of that building and get them out there on the street. We've done that. They're all out on the street. These are civilians. In addition to that, yep, the CSOs. Now we're cutting all of them. Those 91 positions are gone. Then we have our records and ID clerks that have to keep up with the 35,000 people that get arrested every year in this community, 35,000 plus. That's a lot of records to keep up with. That's a lot of people to identify throughout the year. And then you can see what's left is about 126 positions, which includes, by the way, our HR, our budget and management. So you can see we don't have a lot of people in the back office that I can cut. We've cut them over the previous years. And so now what we're faced with is where do I go for cuts? And in this year, as I mentioned up here, we're going to cut the CSOs. We're also, I have to figure out a way to share the burden between our law enforcement function and our corrections function. The only way I can do that is to actually close a corrections facility. And that's why part of the proposal is to close CTC, our Community Transition Center, which is a 300-bed correctional facility. It happens to also house a 160-bed drug treatment program that is nationally renowned. And I hate that we might have to do that, but that's where we're at. I have nowhere else to go for these kind of cuts. Now, what I hope is that, and I can tell you the response has been pretty good so far from the council members that we've had an opportunity to sit down and speak with. If they would simply allow us to keep the savings, a portion of the savings that we generated this year, 10.5 million, of which we think we're going to save a little north of 11 million possibly. If they would allow us to keep 10.5 million of that, I will be able to keep the corrections facility open, which is about 4.4 million, and then I'll be able to keep those additional 140 or 114 police positions on the street. That's the extraordinary lapse. That's that 6.1 million that the mayor hit us with when he introduced the budget, which was a real surprise. But with our savings this year, we can keep those 114 police on the street and keep the jail open. Now, the community service officers and the other several $1 million that we cut, the 154 civilians, they're all gone. That we're not going to try to get that back. You've heard already, finance is running into problems with the budget. What I understand, and I feel their pain, and so all we're asking is give us our savings to carry over for one. And look, I realize this is a one-year savings because all these vacancies that we carried, and I want to make this clear. Back in January, when the police officers took their 3% cut in pay, I had already laid off 48 police officers. The union came to me and they said, look, Sheriff, you need to go hire those guys back. You've got the money now. I said, no, we're not going to do that, because if I hire them back now, I'm probably going to have to lay them off in September, because I know next year's budget's going to be worse than the year we're in. And so I saved that money. We cut overtime. We have been scrimping and saving all year to get this $11 million. And because I knew this moment was coming. So if by keeping that $10.5 million and being allowed to roll it over into next year's budget, I can keep 95 police officers, because 95 of those 114 police positions are staff. Those are officers out there riding the beat today. Those 95 officers will go if I'm not allowed to keep our savings. And we will close a jail and lay off 58 corrections officers and cut 91 corrections positions. But again, even with that, FHP is still going to have to pick up the crashes on state roads in the west side, Arlington and Mandarin, because the CSOs are gone. I can't save them. I've already had that conversation with them. They know it's coming. August 24th is their last day. And FHP is gearing up to take on that responsibility that has always been theirs. JSO has always in the past stepped up to provide a better service to our community, but we can no longer afford that. Now, in addition to that, one last thing, and then I'll just kind of throw it open for questions. Another issue that we have is there's $700,000 that I had to cut on the sheet up there, but well, you can't see it. But we had to cut another $700,000, and actually right at $850,000 in overtime for special events. That means we're not going to have the taxpayer paying for traffic at special events where a promoter is making money on that deal. The promoters need to pick that up. Monster Truck, Florida, Georgia, Gator Bowl, the 10 Jaguar games. Now, we're budgeted through this year, through September 30, so we're working them right now. Now, the city is going to have to, because I understand that the Jaguars and the city have a contract for 120 officers to work traffic and security for those games. The city's going to have to pick that up through SMG, because it's no longer in my budget. I don't have the money for it. So that is going to have to be worked out between SMG and the mayor's office. But these other facilities, or these other events, if those promoters don't step up and pay for their traffic, there won't be any. So that's where we're at.
Sheriff ordinance, you made reference to 450, is it?
Yes, 450, but there's a substitute bill for that, Roger. It'll still be 450, but the substitute goes from 6.1 million, because I initially had asked to have this bill passed so that I could recapture the 6.1 million that the mayor just took there at the end.
Right.
And then I was hoping that if the council passed the rollback rate, as I had requested, that I would then be able to get some of those dollars to keep the jail open. And that's at 4.4 million. Well, when they didn't pass the rollback rate, I immediately asked them to let me amend that ask for 6.1 million in savings and make it 10.5 million in savings. So I'll also have 6.1 million for the police, and 4.4 million for corrections. And we'll be able to keep that jail, that drug treatment program operating. So that's where the 10.5 came from.
So basically, you're asking the council to allow you to keep your savings so you can do those things.
Exactly, because I think those things are critical. They are 95 police officers on the street. Listen, one of the things I promised this community a few years back, I said, you give us the resources and we'll drive crime down in this community. We did that. Crime is the lowest it's been in 40 years. 40 years. Lowest murder rate we've had since 1971. These men and women have done a fantastic job out there, and they know what to do when they get out there. So we've been very successful at driving crime down. I'm afraid that if we're not allowed to keep this, but let me say this is one-time money. This is one-time money. So the question becomes, what do we do next year? Because my savings is gone. Savings is gone. And the vacancies that I generated this year to keep that money has already been cut. So now what do we do next year? And the fix for next year is they got to fix the pension. The mayor's office and the pension board and the union have got to understand this public safety is about to go off the cliff if they don't get that pension fixed. And there are a lot of different opportunities out there for how that can be done, but they need to sit down and start talking and get this done, because even if the council gives me this 1 year reprieve through my own savings, they've only got a year. And they've got to find some reductions in that pension, or we're going to have a public safety disaster next year.
So I just want to be clear on this. You're already cutting the CSOs and you're getting rid of the corrections facility. You're trying to save the police officers and the jail.
Correct. The CSOs are gone.
They're gone.
I can't save them.
The corrections facility is gone too.
Well, yeah. Well, yes, and the police are gone. If I'm not allowed to keep. Right.
Right. And then you're saying that next year you don't want to start cutting into your IT staff, your HR staff, because we're right where we should be. So you don't want to have to start cutting into that area.
Well, we already have. That's the point. We've already cut into those areas.
You cut, but you cut like a couple. I saw a couple numbers up there. It wasn't like cutting 93, but you did cut a couple positions. There aren't as many of those as there are officers.
Right. But yeah, as a percentage, it's probably more.
Right, as a percentage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So Sheriff, just for clarification, if you're allowed to keep the 10.5 million in savings, that would be what, 94 officers or 115?
95 police officers. It's 114 positions, 95 of which are filled.
Gotcha. And
So
on the correction side, it would be how many? You said
91 and 58. 91 positions and 58 actual police or correctional officers.
Sheriff, people don't understand why you have to carry vacancies to start a class. So.
Yeah. I guess I should explain that. Sometimes we have to carry vacancies because, for example, you can't start a police class with one police officer in it. Okay, so we save vacancies up until we get to 40, and that creates what we call a natural lapse. And that's the 1.8 million that the city's already taken out of my budget, because they say, look, we know you're not going to have all these positions filled because you have to build up to 40 positions before you hire a class. So as a result of that, we're going to take 1.8 million out of your budget, and they've already done that. And I don't want to get too down in the weeds with that, but there's a problem with that number right now. If they change the allocation of the pension, but don't go there. It's
Sure.
confusing.
I had a city council member say, listen, JSO has this marine unit that's underutilized, this aviation unit that's underutilized. What's your response to that?
Well, first I will tell you, our marine unit it's underutilized because we cut it back over the last several years. We're down to, I think, 2 officers now, or maybe 3, and we're going to cut to 2. But we had 6. Because of all of the waterways that we have, hundreds of miles of waterway here, and we simply can't cover that anymore. The Fish and Game Commission is going to have to pick up some of that. And at these special events, we still call in our former Marine officers at special events to patrol the waterways in case somebody gets knocked off the dock, or you have the situation like we had the other night with the craft that hit the Annabelle Lee out in the middle of the river. So those kind of things are always happening. Well, not crashes like that, but we're always having events where we need boats in the water.
So just to clarify that for a second, sir, you said you called them back. So these are officers who used to be assigned to the Marine unit.
Right, and they're now in patrol.
Okay. Cool.
If you remember last year when I laid those 48 officers off,
Yeah.
I promised the community that their response time was not going to go down,
Yeah.
because I backfilled. I backfilled with Marine officers. I backfilled with our mounted unit. We don't even have a mounted unit any longer. Now, you mentioned the plane, and that's a good question. Look, several years ago, there was actually an ordinance passed to get rid of this Cessna 172, which we haven't flown in 4 or 5 years. We surplused it. Sell it. The city listed it on bid for $46,000. It's really a $35,000 aircraft. $35,000. And they couldn't sell it for $46,000. So now we're hoping we may have it sold now, though, actually. But that's one plane that is worth $35,000. We used to use it for training, and now we require our guys to get the training on their own to come into the unit. And so that's why we don't use it any longer. But that aviation unit, and people need to know this, that aviation unit saves this community tons of dollars, because we have to fly all over the country to pick up bad guys. People who flee this community after committing some heinous crime, we got to go get them when they're picked up elsewhere. And it doesn't matter if they're in Seattle, Washington, I have to go get them. And so look at the cost that would be if I had to get a commercial flight. But we do that. We compare commercial flight with our aviation unit with our fugitive unit who can drive, ground transportation. We do a comparison on every one of those trips. And if it's cheaper for us to fly commercial, we fly commercial. If it's cheaper to go with our aviation, we go with our aviation. If it's cheaper to drive over to Tallahassee and pick them up, we drive over and pick them up. But, without that asset, we're spending a lot more tax dollars going to get these bad guys.
There seems to be an adversarial relationship with John Crescent-Benny, talking a lot about you in the finance in there. Really digging into this, is that a problem? Do you see that as a problem? Because the last time you were before council, they didn't seem to agree with you.
No, look, I think going into this budget, they know exactly where we're at now. And I think they're going to agree to give us our $10.5 million in savings. What I think is interesting that somebody wants to talk about $100,000 that we spend for an oven because I've got to feed 3,600 inmates 3 meals a day. They want to talk about $100,000 I'm spending instead of the almost $11 million that I'm saving. Doesn't quite make sense.
But I mean, I'm talking about the last time you were before, not on the millage rate, but you were there trying to keep your savings, and they pushed it off. And you were,
yeah, well, they didn't want to handle it as an emergency, and look, I'm okay with that. They wanted it to go through the regular committee process, and I'm okay with that so long as it doesn't get held up in committee. Because if it does, what's going to happen is, if I have to lay off 95 police and 58 correctional officers, and I'm already laying off all the CSOs, there's about $800,000 in leave, terminal leave, that I have to pay. I've got it in this year's budget. I don't have that money in next year's budget. So we can't wait till September 30th and decide what we're going to do, like we did last year. I've got to know ahead of time, because there are costs of closing down a facility. There are strategic reasons I need to know as much in advance as possible to close down a corrections facility. But then the financial impact also has got to hit this budget cycle, or budget fiscal year, not next year, because I don't have the money in next year's budget.
do you and the mayor get along?
Well, sure we do.
This is a battle where every time I go to them, they go, well, ask them about this, ask them about this. And it just seems that everybody's coming down very hard on the sheriff's department. You believe you get along? You believe there is a good working relationship?
Look, I believe that people don't, that they have this impression of where we're at financially as an organization. And I think once they learn the facts, look, we went through this with the Payton administration and two different executives that they had. Once they get into the numbers and see it, they're like, now we get it. You know, look, trust me, if I could have laid off somebody else besides those 48 police officers last year, I would have. But you can see on the civilian population, we're already running bare. And I've got to have dispatchers. Dispatchers are in that. Our records and ID people who identify who's coming into the jail. All of those people are civilian. I've got to have those people. They keep those officers out on the street safe. I can't cut all that. It's easy to say, just cut all your civilians. Well, those people support the police function out there on the street. You can't just cut it. And so once they get to look at these numbers, they go, wow, I get it now. You know, no, we're not fat. We're not fat on civilians. Look at Metro. They're at 31 per 100 positions. Orange County's at 31. Palm Beach is at 44. Now, some of that is because we're consolidated, and so that's a savings for us. But when they get the facts of the numbers, I think that's when they realize we're running pretty darn lean. They learned the same thing that Matrix told them back in 1995 or 2005, 2006. We're lean and we're efficient.
What about doing this again with the mayor sitting right next to you? Would you be open to that? And we could all just talk it out at the same time?
Basically, do this again tomorrow.
Pardon me?
You're going to be doing this tomorrow, City.
Yeah, we're going to do this with finance tomorrow. Yeah.
How
Well, we've done all this with his people. I mean, not these comparisons, but the budget numbers.
How optimistic are you?
Look, I'm pretty optimistic that the council understands that. Look, we can't lay off 95 police, and we do not need to be closing a great drug treatment program. I think they get that. But what they're concerned about is what's going to happen next year, and I'm concerned about that. And I think the message that needs to go with the passage of this bill is, Mayor, pension fund, you got a year now to fix it, because if you don't, public safety for this community is in jeopardy, and it needs to be fixed. And I've been an advocate of that for years now. Anything else?
Sheriff, I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that I got this exactly right.
Okay.
So I think it's pretty simple, but I may be the last person in the room to be worried that there was some misunderstanding. But you spoke earlier about the corrections layoffs. So assuming passage of this bill, then the Matrix program and your jail facility, that would remain open.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to
Yes.
make sure.
Yes. And the 95 police thing. That's right.
It's only community corrections that are gone for sure. The CSOs. The CSOs.
Well, 154 civilian
Civilians
positions,
and
74
including
police. Look,
the CS, yeah.
look, let me make this point too.
Right.
We're whacking 74 police positions. We're still cutting 74 police positions. Now they're vacancies, but
Right.
we're cutting 74 police vacancies.
And how many civilian, was it 150?
154.
154. And how many CSOs?
So look, there's $8 million or so dollars that we're still cutting. We get this 10 back. That's not pie in the sky. I mean, we're not on easy street by any means.
How many CSOs?
So, I think we're down to 60.
71 positions, and some of those are vacant now. But
Yeah, I think we're down to like 62 now, because they've been leaving trying to get other jobs, and so I don't even know what the current number is.
FHP's out a few.
Yeah, FHP has hired a few. That's good. I'm glad to see these guys.
Are they doing the same type of thing for FHP?
They're actually right now running through their academy. We've suggested, why don't you hire them as like
We said
CSOs,
just hire them all as
you know?
CSOs.
Right.
And that's something that they'll have to work out in their agency.